Of course, I got the script in front of me right now.
Sounds good.
It's time for the Beach Brothers Show. Beach Brothers, Virginia business and politics. Three brothers who live in Virginia Beach, Virginia, and we love Virginia business and politics. Conrad Shesviner is our booking agent. If you'd like to appear on our show, contact Conrad. Jose Cruz is our business bully. If you'd like for your business to be featured on the show, contact Jose. I'm Seko Varner, your producer. Shouts to our sponsors, beginning with Tally and Twine. It's time for a high-quality watch from Tally and Twine. That's tallyandtwine.com. Thanks to Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier for all the great sponsorship you've provided. If you're looking for a new car, you don't need to go far. Southern Volkswagen Greenbrier. Ladies, you want your brows to make people say, wow. So you need microblading from IamLitaWe.com. That's IamLitaWe.com. I'm Seko Varner, and I provide credit fixes, tax resolution, private money lending, and debt consolidation through Positive Vibes Financial. Contact me for your needs. And Conrad Shesviner is running for VB City Council. Good luck to Conrad. And now it's time to get beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. All right. It's time to get beachy, It's time to get super beachy on the Beach Brothers Show. How you doing, gentlemen?
Pretty good, brother. Can't complain. How's everything going?
Good stuff. Hey, interesting. We got my good brother, Merle Rutledge. He's checking in. All right. I think he's going to be one of the competition for our guest tonight. That's going to be interesting.
Slightly different.
Okay. All right. It's happening. Okay, so Conrad, man, what's good?
Well, I just want to say great evening again, Beach Brothers Show viewers. And I know we're all still feeling very beachy from this past weekend, this past Labor Day weekend, which saw a return to the oceanfront greatness that we all know and love. Sellout nights on Saturday, sellout nights on Sunday, and even peaceful protest occurred. It definitely felt like a great Virginia Beach weekend. And our great city is looking ahead into 2020 election season strong. I'm running for Virginia Beach City Council, of course, the Rose Hall seat. And here's what I offer in that race: an agenda for an even better Virginia Beach. Refusing to vote to defer flood mitigation and working to supplement funding. Lobbying and voting toward an economy-boosting rapid bus transit system. Voting toward diverse, high-paying industries and affordable housing. Supporting better funding, working rights and mitigated healthcare costs for our schools, working in the city and in the state for improved social equity, voting toward a reformed, positive policing policy, and affirmatively voting for a direct district voting system. There's one candidate who wants to get an even better Virginia Beach that way. He's Conrad Shesviner, and vote for him on November 3rd. And another candidate, this time looking to run for the entirety of the state of Virginia, is also looking for even better. He is Sean Perryman. Now, we don't use the term leader lightly here at the Beach Brothers Show, but Mr. Perryman is the president of the Fairfax NAACP. So leader is our guest tonight. Specifically, the youngest leader in the 102 years of the Fairfax NAACP at 34. He's been the first director of social impact and diversity at the Internet Association. He has an undergrad degree from City University of New York and a law degree from Vanderbilt. He has worked for law firms in Dallas and Washington, but quit in protest in 2016 due to the firm taking on the side of Trump against Chef Jose Andres. He then worked through the office of the late congressional powerhouse Elijah Cummings as counsel on the House Oversight Committee. Tonight, he's gracing the Beach Brothers Show in Greater 757 with insights into bringing Virginia to its greatest capability. Mr. Perryman will begin with the why. Why look at 2021 and at that lieutenant governor's seat?
Yeah, first, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it, Conrad. When I looked at the lieutenant governor's seat and running in general, it wasn't something that was on my radar. It was because I saw that we weren't serving the people on the ground, whether that was from the federal government with no coordinated response for the pandemic, or even here at the state where we're opening up with no sorts of worker protections in place. I thought, I'm here in the Fairfax NAACP, and we were handing out money to small minority-owned businesses to keep them afloat. That shouldn't be. That should be government's job. So that's why I wanted to run and step up, because I've been working with the community as a community advocate, and I feel like I can speak to the issues that are directly affecting communities, not only Black and brown ones, but everyone. This pandemic has really been a great equalizer in a lot of ways, a lot of terrible ways, but a great equalizer nonetheless.
Yes, indeed. All right. Now, you're 34, but still well accomplished. We know the NAACP is one of the foremost advocates for civil rights in American history. In your tenure in the Fairfax NAACP, you've quadrupled paid membership. Speak on your NAACP activism and your efforts to make it grow.
Yeah. Well, when I look at the NAACP, we're a historical legacy organization, but a lot of times we don't bring in enough young people. And that was a real focus of mine. We got to bring in young folks. But not only that, we also have to reach out to other communities. That includes the Latinx community, the LGBTQ community. We couldn't just say, come to our thing and support us. It had to be, we're here for you. We're going to stand with you and fight with you if we have to get what you need. So I think that's what's really brought in so many memberships, because people saw us on the ground everywhere, fighting for people, not only in Fairfax, but across the state. And so that's what's really led to helping us grow, and people just recognizing that. And unfortunately, also the times we're in, people seeing what the, police brutality and everything else, and seeing that we were on the front lines for those issues. So that's really what's caused the growth here. And we're happy to have all the new members.
Interesting. You just spoke on police brutality. Isn't that a hotbed issue? I mean, if you speak on police overreach, can you get elected?
We'll find out.
Right now we're back to blue. So can you get elected and say that something has to change with our judicial system, particularly with the boots on the ground portion of our judicial system, our police officers, our first responders? Can we get elected and say that?
I think you can. I think if we look at what's going on in Virginia's delegation now, they voted, the House delegates, a few minutes before we came on, they voted to end qualified immunity. So I think—
Whoa. Stop. What?
The House of Delegates in Virginia voted to end qualified immunity. It still has to go through the Senate, but that was the vote today. So I think we are looking at a paradigm shift, not only in Virginia, but nationally as well. And when I look at it, I see that this isn't an issue of back the blue. And I hate that term because it's ridiculous, but it's an issue of good governance. Whether you are hiring an accountant in your board of supervisors or you're hiring a cop on the street, you want to make sure that they are acting appropriately. So when I talk about having accountability for police officers, that shouldn't be seen as an attack. I hear from police officers all the time, it's only a few bad apples. Then help me root out those bad apples. Let's hold them accountable. And I think if you talk to people in a sensible way and you tell them this is what it's about, a lot of times they are responsive to that. So I think we can get elected, and I think we're going to win. And I think we can change these issues more so than people say.
Interesting. But the police unions have such big resources when it comes to placing candidates and politicians in office. I just admire anyone who can stand up and make that statement. Interesting. Yeah. Okay. But you think that the tide is changing?
I think the time is changing. I think we have an opportunity here. But I think that it's all about how you go about talking about it. I'm here in Fairfax County, which is the largest county in the state. And
Okay.
I deal with our chief of police all the time. And we had a huge car rally, had 3,000 people come out. And people thought I was going to go up there and beat the hell out of the police, the chief of police by saying, "Oh, I hate him" or whatever. And I said, this man's not my enemy. Our enemy is systemic racism. It's injustice. It's the same old status quo. And now if he wants to stand with me, he can. He can be a part of that change. And here in Fairfax County, we have been able to sit down with the Board of Supervisors and talk about a different system where you have unarmed people responding to mental health crises. Because a lot of these issues, they're not so much of, are you for police or against police? We are asking police to do everything in our society, from counsel our children to respond to mental health crisis to, it's too much. So we need to think about how we're using police, and not think about policing, but think about public safety. What makes us safe in our community the SRO issue, the student resource officers, is the one I always bring up. We have, this huge budget a lot of times for school resource officers to be in schools, but we don't have enough money for counselors in schools. They're still spending that same money in a lot of counties when they're having virtual schools. What are those cops protecting? So I say to them, we need to invest into therapists who can talk to these kids remotely, because these kids are going through hell. They're learning virtually. Their parents may be unemployed. There could be all sorts of things going on. We don't need a cop guarding an empty school. So this is good governance. It's a good governance, accountability, common sense. And it's not an attack on the police. That's the way I look at it.
Okay. Let me flip a little bit. COVID is a wrecking ball to Virginia's economy, of course, America's economy, the world's economy. And like so many other things built into the society, the negative effects are more strenuous on the non-majority class. Primarily in America, that would be primarily the descendants of Africans and the descendants of Indians, the black and brown. So we hear you've been able to secure funding for many of our businesses with forgivable COVID loans. So how did you accomplish that? How did you find ways to find the funds for our businesses when it seems that others couldn't necessarily find the funds? Matter of fact, it seems like some of us couldn't even be found. When you look at those who received the PPL money, it wasn't this. You know what I'm saying? So how did you bring home the bacon?
Well, it's being open-minded. I'm running as a Democrat, and I've been outspoken about Democrats and some of the problems they've had. But what I did was there was a Republican. He came to me. He was working on something called the Virginia 30-Day Project, where they were funding small businesses to the tune of $3,000 for the month. And $3,000 at the height of pandemic, when you were just trying to pay your rent to survive, to get through this, because didn't know when things would open back up, was a huge help. So he came to me, and these were completely forgivable loans where no one was expecting to get paid back. He came to me, Pete Snyder, and he said, can you help me through the NAACP reach minority-owned businesses? And I said, absolutely. We set a goal of reaching 10 businesses at $3,000 a piece, and we ultimately ended up funding 30 businesses, minority-owned businesses here in Northern Virginia, many Black-owned businesses, and we were able to fund them. You look at the CARES Act. You said it yourself. It didn't reach Black people. It didn't reach people on the ground. It reached the LA Lakers. Kanye West got one. Regular folks did not get it. So this is actually what led me to running, like these sort of things. We saw this year civil unrest and protests over George Floyd's murder. The police had endless supplies of rubber bullets. They were able to put down peaceful protests, unpeaceful protests, no matter what, they could do that. But they could not figure out PPE for a health crisis. They could not get us a testing system that made any sort of sense. So what is government for if it's not to serve the people? So that's what led me to run. I figured if I'm on the ground here trying to save small businesses with Pete Snyder, I should be able to do this from a larger platform. And that's what I'm hoping to do, to help more people.
Interesting. Evelyn Vaughn gave the comment, Mr. Perryman, thanks for your deep thinking and level-headed approach to the policing issues. Defund, quote unquote, can be a nuanced two-way conversation. Many think, shift, and resort. shift and resort funding of police. Interesting. Thank you, Evelyn. It's good to know that people are tapping in. Tap in. Speaking of tapping in, brother Conrad.
Definitely shout out to a great friend of the show, Evelyn Vaughn. I wrote a blistering status on the beach bringing down its Confederate monument earlier this year, back in July. And soon the Beach School Board will meet to discuss continuing an equity training package. And it's rustling a lot of anxiety among some Virginia Beach folks. I note you helped advocate for the renaming of Jeb Stuart and Robert E. Lee high schools. May the Beach Brothers hear about your efforts on that and how they may coincide with the message of better equity in Virginia.
Sure. And when I asked people to think about my campaign, I said it's really easy. Think about 3 or 4 E's, but really 4: education, environment, economics, and equity. Equity is a huge one. If you look at things through an equity lens, usually you can figure out how do we serve the most people the best way. With the Jeb Stuart and the Robert E. Lee thing, I first worked on Jeb Stuart High School. To give you a little bit of context, after Brown v. Board of Ed in Virginia in Fairfax County, the 2 schools that were named directly after that decision were Jeb Stuart and Robert E. Lee High School. It was a clear naming to say you are not welcome here. And Fairfax County resisted integration for nearly 10 years after that, probably a little bit more actually. And so the renaming, when I first came upon Jeb Stuart, I was like, well, is this an issue that we really need to tackle? But the misunderstanding of that history, of that education, was so crucial to so many other substantive advocacy issues we had, because if you can't admit what the naming was about or that it was inappropriate, then it's hard to get other things done. So with the Robert E. Lee naming, I started that about 1.5 years ago, and I took that advocacy on. I worked through the Democratic committees, putting pressure on the school board through resolutions. I crafted the state NAACP's resolution on what our approach was to Confederate named schools. And then just through, sort of straight up advocacy, talking to school board members, getting them to this point to where they were examining all the Confederate named schools, that when the George Floyd incident happened, we were able to exert maximum pressure. They were already rolling down that hill, but they were trying to do a slow roll. But once that happened, all the momentum happened. We had some names that were put forth. Once John Lewis died, we as the NAACP circled around John Lewis and really activated the community call for that name. And you can't get a greater 180 than Robert E. Lee to John Lewis High School. The reason that's so important is because you were sending school, and Robert E. Lee, formerly Robert Lee High School, now John Lewis, is a predominantly a school of students of color. You were sending Black and brown kids to a person who believed that they should be chattel property, and that's inappropriate. They were glorifying these Confederates. You went to Jeb Stuart High School, they had a huge pit mural of Jeb Stuart with no shirt on, all muscle bound, and they're telling these kids that this is who they should admire. So that's why that was so important to get that done, and I was glad to have a part in pushing that forward here in our community.
All right, I couldn't help but notice you helped. Excuse me. I couldn't help but notice you help keep police officers out of elementary schools. In Virginia Beach, school board races 2 planks seem to stick out: discipline and safety. Did this program negatively impact either? And could such a thing be done statewide?
No, we didn't see any negative impact to either discipline or safety by keeping elementary kids out of school. Elementary cops out of elementary schools.
Okay.
They were trying to expand the program there, and we didn't think it was appropriate for that. What we do see, though, when we talk about discipline, is that when you introduce cops to school, and that could be at the middle school level or the high school level, what it leads to all the time, it doesn't stop school shootings. The data just shows that it does not prevent school shootings. What it leads to is the arrest of Black and brown kids. And we saw at the middle school level, kids being arrested in Fairfax County for disorderly conduct, which in middle school, I don't know what that means. We're all sort of disorderly in middle school. So I think getting those cops out of school is better for the education. And that doesn't mean that our schools are unsafe. They could be across the street. They just don't need to be interacting with them, because what it does is it turns disciplinary issues into criminal matters, and we need to avoid that.
Thank you so much.
Interesting. So the presence of our first responders, our police force, actually leads to higher incarceration?
What a shocker. When people talk about the school to prison pipeline, they all say, "Oh, I hate the school to prison pipeline." But then you talk about, well, let's get the SROs, the cops, out of schools, and then they say, "Well, I don't want to do that." It's like, well, who do you think is building that pipeline? Who do you think is making that happen? And I have to say, it's not just Black and brown kids. We built some coalition with the disability community, because what these cops, again, this is not about all the cops being bad. They are being asked to deal with issues they just not trained for. So if they have a kid who's autistic, they don't know how to relate to them, and they often end up disciplining them, arresting them, punishing them in some way. So we need to make sure that we avoid that. And I saw the comment about Stoneman Douglas. That's right. And in Parkland as well, infamously, they had a cop in the school shooter entered the school, and the cop ran out the back door. So you've seen these things happen. But what we see is that if we have the cops there, it's not necessarily that you're safe, it's that these kids are going to start to get arrested.
Okay, so then the question is, why do so many of us support the idea of having the police officers in our school building?
Yeah, I mean, I think it gives a false sense of security. I think some people also look at it as the officer can be a role model to the kids or whatever, or be some sort of sounding board for the students. But what that says to me is that we need someone in that role, and we're trying to get the cop to do a job that they're not really supposed to be doing. A cop is not supposed to be necessarily a role model or a counselor or anything else. He's law enforcement. And if we start treating them as such outside of that, we'll see more of these issues arise. So I think what we need to get back to is data-driven policy. A lot of politicians like to tell you a nice story about everything, and it may be a great antidote, but it doesn't mean that that's what the policy should be. So I'm trying to have a data-driven policy agenda here with my campaign.
Interesting. I've known a lot of the SRO. Well, I've worked in school, so I've had a chance to get to know and spend time and become really good friends with some of the SROs. And interestingly enough, and I'm not sure if enough police voices have been heard. I think that enough back the blue voices have been heard, but I'm not sure if enough actual police officer voices have been heard, because those SROs that I know, they shared with me that there were some times where they thought that their presence didn't really prevent issues. It may have exacerbated some issues. And it sounds to me like that's kind of what you're alluding to with your data-driven information. So the data says that it doesn't make the schools safer.
Well,
okay.
Yeah, the data I've seen has shown that it doesn't necessarily reduce any sort of school shooting. You can't really prevent that because if someone has gotten to the point where they're picking up a gun and going to a school, they're pretty intent on doing that. But what we have seen is, and this is from a 2018 GAO study, so people can fact check me, is that it does affect the amount of arrests that we see, especially for Black, brown, and disabled students.
Wow. And, Peter says, thanks for advocating for people with disabilities. His last statement, that people with disabilities are so often victims of police brutality, I think that it kind of speaks to asking a hammer to handle a screwdriver's job. Our police officers have a really great defined role. Yeah, the lights are flickering. And I think that asking them to do too much leads to a lot of the issues that we're seeing. They may be ill-equipped. Our teachers are ill-equipped to handle some of our students. And that's why we provide them with equity training and what's the term that's become more prevalent recently? I can't think of the term right now. It'll come back to me. But there's a lot of trainings that, I think that unfortunately our schools in general have become ill-equipped to address some of the challenges that we're having. All right. So All right, your efforts were key in helping to design the reopening of Virginia. So tell me about those efforts. We want to hear what you wanted to see done for the responsible reopening. And did you get to speak to the right people at the right time? And how much of your planning was accomplished? Just the fact that you were helping in the reopening of Virginia says a lot. So we thank you for that. But tell us a little more about that.
Yeah, so I mean, my involvement was really in forming a statewide coalition. It's funny. I think we were also fed up. Alexis Rogers, who's running for mayor down in Richmond, was one of the people that was part of that coalition. So maybe there was something in the water there that we all got the bug to run after that. But when they started to do the reopening, we didn't see anything that indicated it was being done in a safe way for workers, and that means frontline workers specifically. So we put out a coalition that included CASA, NAACP, Care in Action, New Virginia Majority, just a wide range of folks. And we put out a list of demands that we should have been listened to. And we wrote it directly to the governor. Like so many other things, the governor ignored it and didn't do anything. So I can't say I was responsible for it. Yep.
Which governor was that?
Governor Northam. That's the only one we have, right?
Just wanted to be sure.
No, yeah. So Governor Northam didn't respond to our letter, and I don't think acted on it until about 2 months later. He announced some workforce protections that, strangely enough, matched a lot of the things we put in our letter. But it was 2 months later, so you can imagine how many people were infected during that time period. So I think this goes to what we see generally in Virginia. It is last place for workers, according to Oxfam last year, but first for business. So we put business above workers all the time, and we need to rebalance that, because these are the people that are being infected during this pandemic. These are the people on the front lines that we need to make sure we're taking care of.
Business above workers. We put businesses above workers. That's intriguing.
I think it's true too.
Is that the nature of capitalism?
Well, there's an argument to be made for that, but I would say this. You could say that it's capitalism at its finest, but you could also say that look at any other state and how they're ranked and how they treat their workers. It's not like this. Part of that is because we have the right to work law. Part of that is a long history of corporate Democrats and corporate Republicans who are more interested in the donor class than the people on the ground. And there's a number of reasons why our system is like that. But we need to make sure, especially now, that we are taking care of those that have to be out there and can't socially distance, have to be serving people, and have to do those sorts of jobs and don't have paid sick leave, don't have the ability to miss a day from work and work remotely or anything like that. We have to put those people first.
Interesting. Hey, Peter, thanks for your shout out. Thank you, Peter. Brother Conrad.
Just one little piggybacking point off of that. It is noted that we are the best state in the country to do business in every other year, but we're also routinely last as the best state for workers to work in. So it's sort of like positively and negatively correlated for that very specific reason. And of course, the most glaring concept, as you mentioned, is the right to work aspect. I would like to touch on efforts to reform the school to prison pipeline. We briefly glanced at that earlier. It's very important. An MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding, is a document establishing such efforts in a school justice partnership. You fought for changes to MOUs that reduce arrests in schools by 60% and 40% in respective 2-year spans. Walk us through the past and how you'd like to go forth with the lieutenant governor role on this topic.
Yeah. So, I mean, the changes we made to the MOU for Fairfax County, and some of these changes we're starting to see expanded more broadly. We need to make sure we're not arresting kids for disorderly conduct. It's an inherently subjective charge. If a kid screaming, is that disorderly conduct? Should they be arrested for that? We need to make sure that we're having fewer interactions between officers and students. And I would say, more importantly than all of this, we need to make sure that kids have the right sort of support system. So that would be in counselors and investing in them, not just looking to arrest them if they screw up, because kids, inevitably, everyone is going to make mistakes. So as far as the school to prison pipeline, I think those are some of the issues we need to do. I wrote a letter with Delegate Kay Corey, who's a good friend and has endorsed me this year, to get the SRO budgets taken away, the SRO budgets to fund SROs in schools, especially for schools that are virtual, so that we can take that money and put it towards counselors. And virtual learning is going to be hugely challenging, not only for students, but also for parents. And we need to make sure we have that support system in place.
Awesome. Now, one of our most important questions on the Beach Brothers show is this: what's good with Virginia? Politicians like to run against something, but what is shining bright as a good thing in Virginia you're proud of?
Well, I mean, during this time, especially after the George Floyd incident, I've seen people come together. I've seen the protests, I've seen rallies and everything else. People have come together. Virginia is for lovers is the motto. You really have seen people show love and support each other through this. And I know we've seen the headlines are the violence and everything else, but people are coming together, whether that's parents trying to support each other as they do the virtual learning, or people saying, hey, we're Black Lives Matter, we're going to stand with you. That has really been the thing that's heartened me and got me through this pandemic, is seeing that people are willing to fight together, work together, and try to get through this together. So that's the one shining spot, I would say, for Virginia and what we're going through right now.
I agree.
Interesting. So the uprising has uprised you?
Hey, when I was going, when everything went down and everything is, happened recently, I think that was at the low point of the pandemic. You can only watch the Tiger King so many times, and you get bored at home. You gotta have something where people are now saying, hey, we're gonna change things and we're gonna do this and we're gonna come together and do this in a big way. That was something that was inspirational for me, and so I'm glad to see that. I'm glad I could be a part of it.
For me, and at the end of most of our shows, since January, since January, February, March, May, since about April, I've been saying at the end of the show, power to the protesters. I believe that there's been more substantial change in policy outside of the electorate, outside of voting, than it has been in the last 3 months. There's been more change than maybe the last 30 years. My mother and I had a conversation when, John Lewis passed away. And, I said, he did an excellent job and did great work when he was walking on the Edmund Pettus Bridge and all the work that he did with the civil rights era. But when he became a politician, he simply worked for the status quo in many ways. And so I think that there's been more change with the uprising, with the people raising their voices, more political change than has happened with politicians. So how can we make sure that the politicians are really worth their salt if we're getting more change now without their work?
So that's an interesting question.
That's a different question. But
yeah,
that's what some of the people are looking at. They're like, you want me to vote and the politicians haven't done anything, but when we get together and we raise our voices, things change. Should I vote or should I raise my voice?
I think it's both. I think what you're seeing is not so much that people raise their voice and it just changed, is that the politicians finally had someone raising their voice in their ears, right? Before, I think a lot of times, especially in Virginia, they hope that no one notices what we did. We talked about qualified immunity a few days ago, that got voted down, and we raised hell this weekend.
Hold on, can we just applaud for that?
Yeah, that got voted down, and then we raised hell over the weekend, and now today they had to reintroduce it and re-vote on it. That wouldn't have happened if people weren't paying attention. So I think what people should take from it is not that the political process that they should move away from it. That's not what gets changed. It's your involvement in the political process. We have to stay involved and stay on them, because otherwise the only people that are paying attention is the donor class, is the lobbyists and everything else. They're the ones who follow this stuff. So when we speak up, when we raise our voice, they have to move. That's what we should take from these protests.
I agree. I would often say that once somebody is placed in office, we should place a knife on their neck and say, now it's time to follow our agenda. And if you don't move the right way, you might get cut. We have to use leverage, and voting is a form of leverage, but there are other forms of leverage that move things when we're out of the voting season. So I'm glad that you made that point. Conrad, salute to you for saying both.
And I'll
Salute
just
to you
add,
for saying both.
And I'll just add, when I talk about this race and people say, what distinguishes you? Why should you run for lieutenant governor? I'm coming from the community, right? It would be like electing one of these protesters and saying, this is someone who's been doing the work for years and I trust him to make the change. We don't need more politicians who are looking for a promotion or just say, this is the next logical step for me. I'm running because, it will advance my career. It needs to be about the people on the ground. And the lieutenant governorship can be so much more than what it currently is.
All right. Well, the lieutenant governorship, are you going to be able to change the business as usual unfortunate experience that we've had as a lieutenant governor? And how so?
Yeah. Well, I think the Virginia way is what they call it, right? Business as usual. Things are, this is how things get by. I think the way we break the Virginia way is we elect people who are not a part of that are coming from somewhere else, and we elect a deep bench. We shouldn't be looking at just 2021. We should be looking at 2031. For the next 10 years, what are we doing to move things in the direction it needs to go? And I think start here with that race. And the way I would change it is that typically, not all of them, but a lot of them, when people run for lieutenant governor, they say, I'm going to sit quietly and not offend anyone and then run for governor in 4 years. I've never sat quietly for 4 minutes. So I'm going to get in there and make a lot of noise. And that's including being the president of the state Senate that's notoriously conservative, and pointing out where we need to do better, pointing out where the governor could do better if necessary. This is about breaking the old system of, if we're in the same party, we don't talk about each other. Everything, we just go along to get along. That can't last anymore. Look at where we're at. We're sanitizing our groceries. We're living through the worst pandemic. We are seeing a lot of terrible things. So we need to make sure that when we get in there, we have someone who is advocating for people on the ground. And I look at myself as a community advocate, and I would look at myself as lieutenant governor as there to advocate for the people, not just break ties, but advocate on behalf of those who are most vulnerable and who we need to be helping.
Interesting. Lieutenant governor. Interesting. Lieutenant governor.
Speaking of the lieutenant governor, it might seem to some as a more minor state role, filling in to tie votes in the General Assembly Senate. But what can the office be? I make a parallel to the fact I'm running for city council, and it's important to me to be distinct and more vocal than what I see my peers on social issues. If you have the position of power, use it to be an advocate in power. So what is your vision of a lieutenant governor?
Well, I think you hit it on the head. I think being an advocate in power is the main thing. Like I said, I look at everything, the three to four E's: education, equity, economics, environment. Those are the things that we need to be putting at the forefront, because those are the challenges we're going to face in a post-COVID world. So I think that, like I said, not sitting there quietly waiting to run for the next step. This is not about my career. This is about being a person there that not only breaks ties, which we'll see a lot of ties, but that is there advocating every day for people on behalf of people. But the real power in this role is that you're one of three statewide elected officials. A lot of other states have many more statewide elected officials, but as one of three, and especially if they're all Democrats, which we have seen for like the last 10 years or so, you are a leader in the party, and you should be speaking to and putting out policy priorities, speaking to what our values should be. This is a role where you can have a real platform to push for progressive policies. So that's what I would say I hope to do, and make full use of that role.
Outstanding. All right, we've touched on your education and job experience in your bio. but we'd like to underline parts like technology and creative problem solving. We'll also point out former twice Beach Brothers show guest Vanjie Williams, who is in your contracting as a governor, strategist, and problem solver. What does your problem solving skills bring to the table for Virginia in 2021?
Yeah, I think that might have a unique set of experiences that will really help with this. I used to be an attorney and I advise many businesses. And, when I talk about worker protections, people are like, well, we don't want to chase businesses off. Listen, businesses can deal with regulations. They don't always like to, but what they can't deal with is uncertainty. And what this pandemic, when we are like, oh, well, we're open in Northern Virginia, but not in Hampton Roads. Well, maybe it's 6 weeks, maybe it's 7. That doesn't help you in with business. We need someone who's an honest broker who's going to say, hey, this is the situation and you can make, adjustments to it and deal with that. But I think, working in the tech sector, working with in laws, I understand how to get things done, how to apply pressure to my colleagues and bring people along. So I think all of those experiences are going to serve me well here. And I'll just go into, when I talk about education, equity, and economics, one of the things we have done this year is decriminalize cannabis in Virginia. We need to legalize it. So when people are talking about raising taxes, I said that's not necessary. We need to legalize cannabis, create a new industry, free the people who we've arrested for that, but then go and take that money and invest it in universal pre-K. One of the top expenses you have is childcare. If you can create a new set of jobs in cannabis, create a new set of jobs in early childhood education, that's a new tax revenue right there. So I think we need to get creative. Stop with the same old status quo. Or we're afraid of weed. We're afraid of this. Look, we're in a terrible situation. We need to find our way out of it, and we need to stop arresting people for nonsense too. These are some of the things that I'm going to push for if I'm in that role, and this is some of the things I'm going to push for regardless. So even now, I'm pushing for those things, and I think this is what we need to think about in Virginia: get creative and stop hugging on to the status quo and let go of it a little bit.
Exactly.
All right. Hey, let's take a quick moment and talk about some of our great sponsors, the people who make sure that the show. Man, that's the Rican chef, man. Jose, tell me about their food, brother. I don't want to talk more about it because I can talk for days about their food. I enjoy it, but you can probably pronounce the names better than I can. All I can say is mofongo.
I was about to say, and I can't talk for days about this. Look, as I've said before, if you want awesome, authentic Latin cuisine food, like you feel like you're back home in Puerto Rico, stop into the Rican chef. See Jose and Martha and tell them Jose and the Beach Brothers sent you. You won't be disappointed.
All right, let me highlight one of our other sponsors. tallyandtwine.com. Yes, that's tallyandtwine.com, where you can find beautiful watches for men and for women, made here in the United States, made here in the great state of Virginia, made in Portsmouth, Virginia. That's right, made in America, made in Virginia, and made in Portsmouth. tallyandtwine.com. Great watches for the men. Look at these beautiful watches. Aren't they nice, masculine, really attractive? And these sexy watches for our beautiful ladies. tallyandtwine.com. This is my favorite watch. This is the watch I personally own. tallyandtwine.com. Made in Virginia, made in America. It's time for you to get a high quality watch from Tally and Twine. All right, and Sean, man, do you like watches?
I always use my phone, but I got to get some. I saw some of those. Those look pretty good.
All right. I know I highlighted this, man, but I love
there it goes.
That's pretty slick.
Yeah, it is. Look, it's nice, heavy. It's kind of masculine. They have one for the men and for the women, but they're made in Virginia.
Okay.
They're made in Virginia. Okay, so they're made in America. They're made in Virginia. All right, so if you want to be the lieutenant governor, I think it would be great for you to support one of these great Virginian companies. Made in Virginia.
Man. You got
You
it.
can
I'm
say
gonna have
that.
to
You
go
can say,
buy
you
one.
know what time it is? It's Virginia time.
TNT
Hey,
time.
Conrad, speaking of what time it is, you arrived on time, so your car must not be giving you any problems anymore.
Not any time recently. Man, this car is definitely get you around town, and by around town in the 757. You know how pertinent traffic situations can get. You want to have a nice car, you're going to get that at Southern Volkswagen in Chesapeake, 1248 South Military Highway. Hop on in, speak to Cynthia Rawlings and Charlie Roy, get you one of those around town cars for this 757.
All right, good stuff. Good stuff. We had a question from Andrea, or maybe Andrea. Either way, from Sister Dixon, who question is, what is your day one legislative agenda? So yeah, what is your day one legislative agenda?
You know, there's two worlds that we could be living in, one with the vaccine or one without. And I think that will largely dictate it. But I think for me, like I said, cannabis legalization is a big, big issue for me. The other top issue I would say is connectivity, especially in rural Southwest Virginia. If we are living through a world where we're still dealing with this virus and we're still learning virtually and working virtually, it's unacceptable that we don't have internet connectivity. In my day job, I work in tech policy. And so that's going to be one of the top things to me, making sure that every Virginian has decent internet connection, because that's a necessity now. It's not a luxury. I think you're muted.
That's your day one. That's your day one. But what are some of the long-term things that you would start working on immediately?
Well, I mean, I think those are some of the long-term. Universal pre-K is something we have to figure out. So even if we start with legalizing cannabis, we have to find the dollars to do that. It's a huge issue when we see kids fall behind, achievement gaps. They usually start very young and very early on, because it's about who can afford to be sending their kids to daycare where they're getting some sort of education. But then it's also a huge drain for a lot of parents of, I got to pay $1,200 or more a month to have my kid taken care of while I go to work. It may keep people out of the economy because it may be cheaper for them to just stay home with their kids. So I think that's one of the things I would love to see happen here in Virginia.
How interested would you be in getting rid of the Dillon rule?
About localities, I think there's a strong argument to get rid of it, because some of these localities, and for those who don't know, the Dillon rule essentially says a lot of this stuff has to be done in the state legislature. It can't be done by localities. I think there is that holds people back, especially from progress. It also allows legislators at the state level, what I've seen is them to kick the can and say, it's not my responsibility, Dillon rule, only a state can do it. So I would love to see us have a little bit more flexibility for different jurisdictions to make those kind of changes.
Okay. Hey, what's your stance on SB 961?
Which one is SB 961?
For those who are uninitiated, what did you say?
Which one is SB 961?
Vincent, you might want to, Mr. Blues Brothers, you might want to pop back in and let us know a little more about SB 961. I know it's a lot of things to keep. Let's see if he pops in. Come on, Vince. Vince, you can do it. Vincent, you can do it. Vince, he's doing it. It'll take, okay. It's coming. It's coming.
Okay, great.
But I'll tell you, Lieutenant Governor, if you were Lieutenant Governor right now, what are some of the things that you could do differently than are being done right now?
Well, I think that, right now in a special session, the lieutenant governor's role is going to be to break ties, and that's going to be first and foremost. But I think what we've seen, whether it's the qualified immunity thing or recently the death of a bill that would have given teachers paid sick leave, is we don't see a progressive voice, and especially in the state Senate, who's advocating for workers. So I would say that. Oh, Vincent's a troll, so that's great. So I would say that you really could serve a role in bringing the legislators together on both sides, especially if you're a Democrat. You could serve a role in making sure that we're coordinated. A lot of times we see, something going forward in the House and die in the Senate and that sort of thing. So I think that's really the role, playing as a leader bringing these legislators together, making sure that we have values that we stand for. So that's what I would say.
All right. Well, let's go with Vincent's question. SB 961. What's your stance on, was it assault weapons ban? Yes.
Assault weapons ban. Yeah, so I would probably support that bill. Depending, I have to look at the legislation on it to see, but I would probably support that. I do believe that people have Second Amendment rights, but I do believe we could also have limitations on those. So I would have to see the particulars of it. There are a lot of terrible bills that go through the Senate, especially with guns. People do overreaches on that, so I would want to make sure that people have the right to guns, but then it would also depend on what they're defining assault weapons as, because a lot of times in popular consumption, just general layman's talk, they say assault weapon, they're not sure what that is. But I do not think that people need to have assault weapons or have easy access to guns with no sort of background check or anything like that. So I'm clear on that issue. I know Vincent probably is upset, but I don't care. So that's okay.
All right, let's see. Okay. So Vincent's having a time. All right. Thank you, Vincent. Look, if anyone else, including Vincent, would like to pop in with a question or comment, we'll do it within the next 3 to 4 minutes. I think we've gotten a lot of great information out of Mr. Perryman. So while we're waiting for another juicy question, hopefully Vincent can provide one. Let's talk NAACP.
Yeah, sure.
Is it still relevant? Is the NAACP still relevant?
That's a great question. I think the Legal Defense Fund is incredibly relevant. I think the work they do there is amazing. So at the national level, Legal Defense Fund is separate in the sense they bring the lawsuits, they do the litigation. I think at the branch level, it really depends. Every branch, a lot of people, it's funny, as an NAACP president, like when someone doesn't like what you do, they're like, you're paid to stir up trouble. You do not receive any paychecks in the NAACP. I can guarantee you that. It's a completely volunteer organization, and as such, it really depends on the branch and how active it is. It's a legacy organization with a lot of power behind its name, but a lot of times it's an older membership. So what we need to do is make sure that we are getting younger, progressive Black voices in there to lead. The NAACP is what you make of it, and if we got more people in there, we could take that legacy name and bring a lot of power to it. And that's what we've seen here in Fairfax County. So I think it is relevant. The relevance of your individual NAACP, depending on where you're at in in Virginia, really depends on, the membership, the makeup, and what they're pushing for. But I think it still has a place. It's still relevant, but we need to make sure it remains young membership and powerful. So it's something that it could become irrelevant, and we should never take that for granted.
Okay.
The Fairfax branch would be around a lot of universities and colleges in that section. So I imagine that would be a great place to try to bring in more people. It's just a really, really young crowd who are also very educated.
Yeah, and the college, so GMU has its own NAACP branch. So at the college level, if you have enough members, you can make your own branch, and you don't have to be beholden to them.
All right. Sister Dixon's back with another question. If there is a second wave, do you have any ideas on how to deal with COVID-19? Any thoughts?
Yeah, it's honestly terrifying when I think about it, and I don't feel like we're talking about it enough. What's propped up the economy in a lot of ways is outdoor seating for restaurants. That's keeping people employed, keeping the doors open and letting people, go out and eat and spend their dollars. In the winter, when people aren't going to be willing to sit outdoors, I think we run a real risk. And then you're going to have that combined with flu season. I think that that's going to be a real issue. As far as what we do about it, I mean, to be honest with folks, if she asked about what do we do about a second spike, the federal government cannot think that giving $1,200 and telling everyone good luck is enough. We need federal assistance, because if these restaurants aren't open and people are going to be shut down more, we're going to need more assistance. And every other nation that has seen this has done continued assistance throughout the length of the pandemic. At the state level, honestly, there's not a lot we can do other than an eviction moratorium, making sure that we're not throwing folks out on the street, and then also looking at getting unemployment assistance to people faster. Because what we've seen is, 50 million people are unemployed nationwide. And here in Virginia, a lot of people couldn't get their unemployment assistance because they didn't have enough staff to get it out on time. They were getting nothing but busy signals. So we need to make sure we are thinking about all these issues and hoping that the federal government gets its act together.
That could be another thing the lieutenant governor leads on.
Hey, well, like I said, it depends. Are we in a world with a vaccine or a world with not? If we don't have a vaccine, that's definitely one of the issues that we need to champion.
Okay. Evelyn Vaughn, Sister Vaughn has come back. Can you speak on your view of how the Me Too, women's equality, and BLM, non-white equality, are intertwined, interdependent, or is that an area that you really don't deal with?
So he says how the Me Too women's. I'm not sure I understand the question, but I think if I'm understanding, the way I'm looking at it is, I think these movements, whether Me Too or BLM, are they intertwined? I would say no. I think these are separate issues, but I do think Me Too, Black women go through the same issues as anyone else. So I think we always have to look at the intersection of being both Black and a woman, and the challenges you face, and lifting up the voices of Black women to make sure that they have a unique experience of whether that's sex discrimination or gender discrimination or race discrimination in the workplace. I think that there are some issues there where they are intertwined, but the two movements do stand on their own.
How would you defend BLM against ad hominem attack?
Yeah, I mean, so I think a lot of people look at BLM like the organization. I think Black Lives Matter, for most folks, when they say that, they're not talking about they don't have a BLM card that they're a part of some group. They're talking about Black lives and what is happening here. The devaluation of Black people here in America is a real thing, and it should matter, and it's a systemic thing, and all the data shows it. So it's something that we need to recognize. So when you say Black Lives Matter, I think people are talking past each other. Some people are talking about the organization. Some people are talking about the movement of what this means. And I would say, the ad hominem attacks, it depends on what they say, but, it shouldn't be an issue for anyone to say Black Lives Matter. Why is that so upsetting to you that, you would dare say that the Black life has value? So I would just point to the person and say, why does that upset you so much?
Okay. Good brother Merle Rutledge tapped in earlier at the very beginning. I guess he'll be, you'll end up going through the primary process.
Mm-hmm.
And then if successful, then you'll end up being the candidate of choice for the party. Mm-hmm. And Merle Rutledge, if he wins the primary, then he'll end up being the candidate of choice.
He's running for governor, though.
He's where?
He's running for governor.
He's governor now.
Oh, he's running for governor. Well, now that would be intriguing. That would be intriguing. Mm-hmm. Have you had a chance to look at some of the? Let me see. You're a Democrat, so have you looked at the opposing views, positions, and concerns when it comes to the lieutenant governorship? And what are some of the things that? How are you different from what I guess your eventual opponent would be?
Well, it's hard to say who the opponent will be. I think the Republican Party, at least in Virginia at the statewide level, and like I said, I was on a Republican show this morning, a conservative show. I think that they're been pushing forward more extreme candidates, more far right candidates than many of their party. And that's why they've been losing elections for a lot of times. I would say, in the last 10 years, they've lost a lot of statewide elections. So it depends on who they put forward. But here's the thing, whether it's that guy talking about the assault rifle ban and, trying to quiz me on section SB 931 or whatever, everyday people don't care about those issues. The issues usually don't split between Democrat or Republican. People are trying to get food on the table. They're trying to pay their bills. They are the usual split is political or non-political. Like political animals, they really care about these stuff, and that's important. Don't get me wrong, but the everyday person just wants to make sure their family's safe, that their kids are getting educated, that they can make a living. And I think as Democrats, when we talk about some of the issues we're talking about with public safety or with labor, right to work, and everything else, we're talking about the bread and butter issues that get people fed. The average person is not, really concerned about collecting a bunch of assault rifles. They're worried about what are the economics, the education, and equity. Am I going to be taken care of by a government? Am I going to be discriminated by the government? Am I going to be able to provide for my family? So that's why, I made a little fun of our friend Vince there, because these are our issues that matter to people, and they should be taken seriously. And I think regardless of who's running, I'm going to speak to those issues and make sure that we're not talking about partisan politics and the hot button ideological things. We're talking about getting people to work and taking care of their basic needs.
Now, I would like to sort of tie in a devil's advocate defense of Mr. Vince and civil rights at the same time, because I'm right next to the autobiography of Malcolm X, and one of his best pictures is him looking out the window holding an AK. And of course, as we know, the Black Panthers took over the General Assembly holding guns. So there could be an intertwine if you try to look at it through Vince's eyes, if he's also fighting for the same social issues, but also heavy gun rights.
I think, yeah, there's always a civil liberties argument to be made. And like I said, I do respect people's Second Amendment right. I'm not someone who is any interest in taking anyone's guns or whatever. But I do think we need to have common sense gun laws where not anyone could just walk into any store and buy an arsenal of weapons. And there are certain weapons that I think that there is a discussion and reason to have debate about whether the public needs to have those guns. So I do think there's room for argument on that, but I do think we need to have common sense gun laws.
Okay. Hey, before we come to an end, I wanted to highlight something that we have coming up this Saturday on this show, on the Beach Brothers show, without Conrad, and on the Hampton Roads Black Caucus's Facebook page, and on the New Journal and Guides page. We're going to have the 2020 Virginia Beach Mayoral Candidate Online Forum. So you'll see RK, Mayor Dyer, and Jody Wagner battling it out to get your resources, your interest, your support. So stay tuned. It's going to be 1 p.m. Saturday, this Saturday, 9/12/2020, 9/12/2020. And the great thing is these videos will remain on these particular channels after the forum. So after the forum, you'll be able to go to all three of these locations: the New Journal and Guides Facebook page, the Hampton Roads Black Caucus's Facebook page, and the Beach Brothers YouTube page. This is being brought to you by the Hampton Roads Black Caucus, the New Journal and Guide, Positive Vibes Consulting, and AAPAC, which is the African American Political Action Committee. It's going to be an interesting experience. Hey, Mr. Perryman, last words.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to meet all the Beach Brothers. I've seen you all on social media, so it's fun to be here. I would say last words. My campaign is about the people. It's about education, equity, and economics. It's about the basics of making sure that government returns to serving people and not anything else, not donors, not itself. That we are together in this and during this pandemic, and we find a way out and find a better way for all of us in our community. So I hope that you all will check out Perryman for Virginia. I'm on Facebook. On Twitter, you can find me at Sean Perryman3. I look forward to talking to everyone here more and learning about the issues that are important to you. Thanks for having me.
All right, good. So for those who left messages for Mr. Perryman, he's going to go back on the Facebook page and he's going to look at your comments. He's going to reply to them and engage. So Vincent, beware.
and Vince, it's no hard feelings. I just had to mess with you a little.
Okay, Conrad, last words, sir.
I would like to also have just a brief reminder, of course, my own run for city council here, and I'm a big fan of the type of candidate that future Lieutenant Governor candidate, Mr. Perryman, is, and that's what I would also like to be, the model that I'm also going to try and fight for equity here in the city of Virginia Beach, from housing all the way to businesses as well. Give him a shot, give me a shot, and make sure we all are improving ourselves.
Jose, last words.
Outstanding there, Conrad. That was awesome. I just want to thank all the viewers for coming for their comments. I mean, it was awesome, and I want to highlight one of Andrea's comments. She said it's time to call all state senators up in November. No stone unturned. It's time to be loud. That's the only way you're gonna get anything accomplished. I mean, you can be loud and get your point across without being destructive and violent. And that's what we need to work on. That's what we need to get back to doing.
Ashe. Okay, I just want to say, I always say peace to the protesters, but I also want to say, peace and power to those who are focusing on making the changes that need to happen. If you're protesting or not, you don't have to be marching in the streets to necessarily be a protester in my mind. If you're a Twitter protester, it took me a while, but I respect you. I love you. If you're a reporter, if you're working for CNN or for Fox or whatever, and you're raising the truth and you're raising the awareness, or if you're with, what's that? There's a new news channel. They're kind of intriguing as well.
Oh,
starts with is what?
Is it One American News? Are you talking about that?
One American. I watch them all. I like them all. I like the different viewpoints. So everyone who's raising the issues and making us all more politically aware. So I want to say power to you. You are protesters in my mind, and let's change things. Think about it. The Boston Tea Party. The Boston Tea Party had property destruction.
Yep.
It had riots. It had people harmed. People were actually killed.
And cultural appropriation.
Yeah.
Remember what we were dressed as. So.
Yeah. They dressed up like, some of my ancestors, the Native American part of my family. And that's okay. Let me get off, because I used to get really angry about that. I still do. And I should. So the point is, those thuggish behaviors in the early part of our country's development.
Love the wording.
I'm just following our commander-in-chief. It kind of led to this beautiful nation that we have. So we have to continue protesting and making change so our country is the beautifulest. I know it's not a word. The most beautiful. There's work to be done. Keep doing the work, and I salute everybody involved in the work. So thank you for watching the Beach Brothers Show.
But to piggyback 1 second off what you said, just like you said, but everybody that's involved. If you have a gripe and you want to see change and you want to do it, okay, you got to get involved. You can't be, complaining and griping about everything, but then you're not going to vote. You're not going to do this. You're not going to do that. So if you're not part of the solution, you already part of the problem. Mm-hmm. That's all I had to say on that. I'm going to get off my soapbox, because I get tired of hearing people say, oh, is this person off? Is this person? Okay, but did you vote? No. What's my vote going to matter? You know how many people are thinking just like you?
Okay, so Jose's getting on his soapboxes now. Okay.
Now, off the soapbox. That's it. We're wrapping it up.
Look, we need to get Mr. Perryman on the show more often, man, because now we got Jose lighting up, man. Okay,
I'm behind you, Sean. If you need anything, I'm behind you, sir.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank you. And Mr. Perryman, good luck.
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate
you. Good night, everybody.
Keep it, say it with me, beach